Hey everyone, welcome to Data Umbrella's webinar. I'm going to do a brief introduction and then Abdulazeez will do his presentation on FastAPI and we'll open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. This webinar is being recorded and we will place it on our YouTube channel usually within 24 hours. A little bit about Data Umbrella. We are a community for underrepresented persons in data science, and we organize data science events, and we are a nonprofit organization. This is our team of data scientists. We are in the US, in Kenya, and our organizers, one in Germany. So we have a few organizers in different countries. We have a code of conduct. We ask you to, contribute to making this a professional, friendly, welcoming community for all, and that includes the chat as well. There are various ways to support Data Umbrella. The first and foremost is to follow our code of conduct. You can also join Discord. The link to our Discord server is on our website. And so you can join our Discord server and connect with the community that way. You can also support us by making a donation to our Open Collective. And so we are on opencollective.com/data-umbrella. And if you work for a company that uses Benevity, what that means is whatever donation you make, your company will match it dollar for dollar. Our YouTube channel has a really superb library of talks that we've been organizing for the last 2 years. A lot of them are related to open source and Python and some R stats, so check them out. We have a lot of playlists depending on what you're looking for. We have a career advice one, we have a data visualization one, some tools for data science beginners, a whole library of contributing to open source, as well as a PyMC and NumPy series. We have a monthly newsletter, and that is dataumbrella.substack.com. We send communications once a month, and we do not sell your email address to anybody, so you won't be getting spam from us. Our website has a whole lot of resources related to conferences, open source, inclusive language, and we encourage you to check them out. We're on all social media platforms as Data Umbrella. Twitter and LinkedIn is where we're the most active. Meetup is the place to go for upcoming events. YouTube, as I mentioned, is where our event videos are placed. And we also have a blog, blog.dataumbrella.org, to see what's happening within our community. This webinar platform that we use is called Big Marker, and we have live captioning. And so if you go to the very top, there's 2 letters called CC for closed captioning. And you can select that and pick the language. I hear that English is the best captioning available, even though there's options for translation. So if you would like to activate that feature, you can. We have timestamps that we do of all our videos. So if you're interested in doing the timestamps for this video or some of our recent events, I'll share the link to this issue in the chat. And there's instructions on how you can like watch a video and give timestamps and how to make that contribution online. We have a few, August is very busy for us in a good way. We have a few upcoming events. On August 16th, we have Intro to Front-End Development with React. On the 23rd of August, we have Software Engineering for Probabilistic Programming. And August 30th, just a week later, we have software testing and open source software and data science. And so you can sign up for these events in our Meetup group. And if you can't make it to the events due to some scheduling reasons, we will record them and you'll be able to find them on our YouTube. Today's talk is Building APIs with FastAPI. Abdulazeez Adeshina is a software engineer and technical writer with 4 years of combined experience. He has published over 20 technical articles on different software technologies and is also the author of the FastAPI and MongoDB boilerplate. He has recently released a book, Building Web APIs with FastAPI, now available on Amazon. And I will share a link to that. We have a discounted link that is good until August 25th, which I will share in the chat again as well. And so with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone and screen share to Abdulazeez. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we will answer them as we can.
Thank you, Reshama. So hi, I'm Abdulazeez, a software engineer, technical writer, and the author of Building Python Web APIs with FastAPI. In this webinar, we'll be discussing what APIs are and how to build one with FastAPI. To conclude this webinar, I'll also walk through how FastAPI can be used, by data scientists as well. APIs. So what are APIs? The acronym API stands for Application Programming Interfaces, and they primarily serve as the bridge for interaction of two components, mostly clients and the server. Let's paint a quick example. In this live stream, for example, you have to access what I'm saying, and then we are using the big marker platform. We have the clients, which is what you can see. You can see me speaking. This is the clients. But the client also requires, an end-to-end connection. How does it get to me? How do you get to see it? We use an API in between just to get all of this information. And so the server is what we most likely do not see because this is stored somewhere. It could be somewhere else. It could be in cloud as well. But the API is what serves as a bridge to connect both parties. An API has several components. You can't just send an API request or you receive a response without certain components being part of it. So an API, for example, has a header. It has the resource path, the body, as well as the verb. So what do you mean by verb? You are trying to make an operation or to ask your API to do something, or you want to interact with your API. You need to tell the API, yes, I need you to do this. So what are the verbs we have? We have a couple of them, which we'll see in the next couple of slides. But for now, let's just understand what we have here. We're going to break them down into the next slide. So we're going to start with the API header. The header basically contains method fields and data about a request as well as a response. Basically about the API, it gives us information on what this API is doing, for example. Here I have this header, which says to accept the JSON, which is a JavaScript object notation data type when the request is sent. For example, we have a post request here. The post request here is the verb. Depending, you can interact with the API by sending a body. There's in case of a post request or a put request operation, because, for example, you want to, when signing up for this webinar, you input a couple of details into the form, which is sent over to the server. The API is in charge of receiving this data you send as the body and then transmits it back to the server. For example, the response, which is the congratulatory email that you register for the webinar. Now, depending on what it is, like I said earlier, if it's a request, it takes the JavaScript object notation as we saw previously, where we see the API headers. So the API body is going to be in the JSON format. The API body as well can be subjected for validation just to ensure that we are sending the right thing. And in FastAPI, we use Pydantic, or you could use Python data classes. So we have the verb, which I mentioned earlier, that tells the type of action to be done by the API. We have the post verb, the get verb, the put verb, as well as the delete verb. The post simply means to create a new resource. The get is to retrieve an existing resource. The put is to update an existing resource, and delete as well is to get rid of an existing resource. This is why it is called CRUD. It's commonly known as CRUD. That's create, read, update, and delete in the layman terms. All of these API operations are quite meaningless if we don't have resource path. So this way is this action being acted upon? What are we sending this request to? Or where are we expecting a response from? So here we can see this localhost URL here, 127.0.0.1, and the port, and we can see that it has a path parameter. This example that we have here, for example, is shows that we are trying to create a new to-do. The path parameter is to-do. That means we are sending to this resource, but we want it to get to a particular path on it, that's a particular route. Just like when you have a deck of cards, say a joker card, and you need to get maybe the queen or something, that is what to-do stands for. That's a path parameter. So this is how the resource path looks like. It's just what you need. It's usually a specific one. If it doesn't exist, proper responses will be returned. All those operation can be tasking. There are a couple of things. How to interact with these APIs. You can't just look at the API and then just send request. Something has to work underneath. You could use routing. So routing is supposed to handle HTTP requests from the client to the server, and a route is an API resource path, which you just saw in the previous slide here. So for example, this is a resource path. The to-do here is route. That is, you're telling whatever clients, okay, I want you to go to this to-do route here. And so this route is where we send an HTTP verb operation, which could be the post, the get, the put, or the delete one. Of course, the routes as well have an anatomy. That is, how do they work? What does the route consist of? What does it comprise of? Like I mentioned earlier, the route is defined to be a resource path, which handles a specific operation executed by client. In most cases, you are the client, or the application that you have where you're making these requests or retrieving a response is the client. So looking at the image, we have the resource path, which is the route. We can see 17.0.0.1. On the port 8000, we have to do as a path parameter, as well as the ID as the query parameter. What is the query parameter, if you ask? The query parameter is just an identifier in the routes that tells you that I want to get this specific resource that tallies to this particular query. Think of it as a database, for example. You are trying to receive a specific record from database, you have to use a particular key to look for it. So this serves as such. So now we have the ID, which is the query parameter. And I want you to get it to do, that's the ID matches 16. What to do is just the path parameter that just shows that yes, this is about to send the request to. And the verb here as well is get. You can see we say have the header. So a get request, we most times do not have a body for it, only for when you're creating a resource. We've come this far, and so why don't we see how FastAPI does it? Before we move, I'd like to give a brief on FastAPI. FastAPI is a Python application framework. This is fast and efficient. Primarily, I love FastAPI. It's really good, very fast and efficient, and it allows you to create beautiful web APIs with little boilerplate code, with little code, less code, with less stress. So it's a really good API. It's mostly used by data engineers because of its speed. Companies like Netflix and even NASA, I think, uses the FastAPI framework. So we're going to build an attendee API that just like demonstrates, how FastAPI works. We're just going to have a couple of routes where we can add, an attendee, maybe view the number of attendees, and probably delete an attendee as well. So I'll move on to that now. Okay. So the first step will be to install the FastAPI framework. So already I have that installed, but to do that, you have to just run pip install FastAPI. If you're using Poetry as well, you could use that. I've just installed, so it says installed. Then you have to install uvicorn. Uvicorn is an ASGI library that allows us to run the application. What ASGI means is a synchronous gateway interface. So we install that by saying pip install uvicorn. Think of uvicorn as an Nginx, for example, that allows you to just bring your application to life. It's like the whole wide world to have access to. So let's start building the API for our attendees application. We start by importing FastAPI from the FastAPI library. There's a FastAPI class. So we have from FastAPI. What's FastAPI? Now, we want to have an instance. Let's say we have the app is going to be posted to FastAPI. We want an instance of this class. And now this allows us to get access to the various routing verbs that we looked earlier that's supposed to get, put, and delete. So the first thing to do is to create a get route that welcomes us to this page. We're going to say, useful enough. FastAPI is an asynchronous framework, so you could use it both synchronously and asynchronously. But we're going to use the async part here. So we're going to have define welcome to the webinar. We can have return here, but this is just a normal function that anybody could just define. So how do we now make it a FastAPI route? What you do is use this decorator, then you put the instance of the FastAPI class, and then you put the verb. In this case, it's get, and then we're getting that's the home page. As a rule of thumb, I like to type hint, and so we can say return. We can have a message says welcome to the webinar. We have the basic routes. How do we run this? What's the next step? That's why we have uvicorn. Now there are two instances with which you could use run uvicorn. You could either run it from the command line, or you create an entry point in a file, maybe main.py, where you create where you initialize uvicorn to run once the particular file is run. But let's use the command line for now so we can have an idea of how it works in the event we're unable to create an entry point. We're going to call uvicorn. The name of the file holding the FastAPI instance is API. We're going to put a colon to the FastAPI instance, which is app. If we wish, we can define a host for it. So we're going to say the host should be, let's say, 0.0.0.0. And the ports, say 80, okay. And then we run this. As well add the reload here. You can see we have the application running on the port 0.0.0.0 colon 80, and you can see the log information here telling us that the application startup has been complete. And then when we click on this, and we can see we have welcome to the webinar. The FastAPI, the beautiful framework, it comes in with documentation, and we have an interactive documentation at docs. Yeah, it allows you to perform requests if you don't like to use the command line. So we could just like execute this. It shows us, the call command in the event we want to try this out. It shows us what we can do with it, and then gives us the response which we wrote. Here we activated the reload here. So that means whatever changes we make, the application restarts, and then we can see how it works. So when you go back here, we can see this is the resource path here. This is the verb, and this is the header. Like I mentioned earlier in the get part, we don't necessarily have to put a body. Most times you don't. If you have to use a body, you use the post verb. So let's define a verb that that says maybe we can put our names just to show that we are here. So it's going to be a very simple one. So we're going to say app post attend. We can have a function that says register for the webinar. Here we can have name as a string. Then we can say return. We can say message here. Okay, we can do this and say you have, so you could just use the name as well. You can have something like there, just name. You have successfully registered. If I save this, you can see where the FastAPI, where uvicorn notices any change and then reloads. So like when I go back to the interactive documentation page and I reload as well, you can see the post route has been created and as well takes this body parameter, here, name. This is the query parameter, as you can see. So now we say, we're going to put do. When I click on execute, you can see this query parameter name here. And this is the route attend. This is the name. You can see there the name we passed. I've successfully registered for the webinar. Okay, so likewise, FastAPI gives us the privilege to have something like the body here. So if I decide to make this type body and make it default, it's not needed. Okay, save this. The string is going to be equal to body. So once I reload this, I now have a request body. I can say, let's say we have name, do. Okay, then execute this. Let's adjust this. You can see this. Let's take it, just a quick overview of what we've done. Just a moment. In the event where this is not made of type body type, we have a query parameter instead, just like what we have here. When I load this, you can see this is the query parameter. So define the query parameter for a route, to just add it here, but to distinguish that no, we want it to be a body parameter, you just simply append the body here. So if you go to these routes now and say, let's say we have and as you have there, Reshama, you have successfully registered for the one. But so how do you keep count of the attendees? So let's just create a dummy database. We're going to see attendees. Have an array. We're going to say the attendees that are penned the name, and that's all. So the next one we're going to find is to get the list of attendees. We're going to say async to find retrieve attendees. To make this a list, let's make it a dictionary instead. And you can say return attendees. Let's make this way. Oops. Now, when we go back to the interactive documentation and reload, you can see the new route is now there. So we try this out. We have no attendees at the moment because we've not registered anything. And because we reload our application, the state is also refreshed, and whatever temporary data we have is also gotten rid of. So when I post, say, Abdulazeez, and I execute this, it tells me I've registered. Then how do I verify? I just run this and I can see my name. But yes, it's a list of attendees. If I as well say we should have Reshama, and I say, okay, let's check if it's updated, I can find this. But what if I want to get a particular attendee? And how does it work? Now we want to have a path parameter. Let's want to make sure something works. All of these have been path parameters, but we want something extra. That is maybe get attendee and the name. Let me say retrieve attendee by name. And we have the name. Remember to query. Just this shows that I can say return. Define. Yeah. Return attendee. Attendee. We have the name. Actually, we might not even need this, so let's remove this for now. And okay, so we have to find maybe have to put that as well. So what we do is check as the attendee. Let's say we say introduce, we just say if name in attendees, and we're going to return this. Otherwise, we're going to return, let's say, a message, and there is an attendee. No attendee, matching this. And then we have to refresh just to see that we can now say, okay, just going to find one, is Abdulazeez. When we run this, we get there's no attendee matching this name. And as you can see, instead of a query parameter, we have this. You have this here. So what might be, or might have changed, you may ask. So when you create a route that has a path parameter and it takes an extra variable, we need to define it here as well. It matches it. But if I put, say, an ID and an integer here, it doesn't consider it here, but considers it as a query parameter, as you can see here. You can see A and you can have B. It's an integer, so we have 1. And you can see now that this query parameter is now different. Suppose I have something else, it's going to be the same way. So it's the new parameter. When you're attendee, let's say we have do. We execute this. That we've been added. Want to add Reshama as well. And see she's been added. So we'd like to get the list of attendee, but let's say we want to find Reshama first. So let's say we have a do. You can see, oh yes, I do exist indeed. But if I put Abdulazeez, because it's not there, there's not any such thing. Likewise, we go to Reshama and Reshama. So we have all of this. But what if we have an attendee who is signing out and would like to go off? What do we do then? So we're going to make use of the delete verb. And we're going to take once again the attendee's name. We have a saying find delete attendee from list, where you have the name or the string. And the reason why we associate this is so we can use it in the function body, because this isn't accessible in the function body, so we have to create a corresponding argument as well. So we can say so we can say talking to attendees, we're going to require, so we can say attendee for attendee and attendees if the attendee is not equal to me. Basically, what we did here is to reshuffle the yes. Okay. We have this attendee here. Oh, an attendee if attendee. Okay, so we have results. Okay. So now we're going to return this is message. We can say updated attendees. How about we try it out? So what we did is basically just use the delete verb, which removes a resource. It sends a delete operation, tells the API that, hey, API, I would like to remove this particular component value from the server as well. And so if this obviously exists, it's going to do that. So let's refresh once again. And then we can create one first. Let's create new attendee. So we're going to create another one, say data umbrella. Okay. And we're going to say, we're going to create a third one, say anon. We have 3. So but let's confirm the count using our routes that we created. So we have this, we have anons here. So like anon is like anon has gone off the core, and so we want to delete it. So we're going to put anon. Then it executes this and says, this is a bit attendees. Now we can see we have both of them. And so we can also confirm again here by execution. You can see execution, as you can see, have an on, which is weird. So we can check. Okay, so we are not updating this. So we have attendees because we're, so once we okay, so we are going to do this. We have to restart. We have to make changes. So we have to get an on. Okay. And then once we get delete, we have just an on. We try to delete once again. When we want to execute, and it says we have an error because of this. So what we do instead is we having, let's see, this works. So this is an array. These. Okay. I think we're going to have to leave this like this for now, but just do results is equals to an array, and this is for array. Oh, sorry, attendee. Attendees, we want to append. Attendee is not name. If we found this is now obsolete. There we go. Then we'd like to say these dot there. We could use this and extend results. Just okay. Let's refresh once again, and we have to create a new attendee. So we have Reshama. Okay. So let's create another.
There was one question which I guess you can address later, but the repo is empty, so maybe maybe the code still needs to be pushed to the repo.
So once after this call, once after the code, the repo will be updated.
Okay. It will be there. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yes. Yes. Welcome. Okay. So once it gets the list of attendees that we have now, you can see we have two unknowns. So we like to get rid of one. So we delete one of the anonymous attendees. You can delete. Then we like to the list of attendees we have now. If I see we have just Reshama. So this is how the basic API works. The first step is to import the FastAPI class. Alternatively, you could also use the API router class. Yeah. But by using the API router class is used when you have multiple routes and you're not building a simple application. So at the end of the day, you have to use, if we're using, let's say we have router, that's using this particular class, to add it, to make sure we can use it, we have to do app.include router. We have to use this. If you're building a very small size application that probably has just one route or less, you just use the FastAPI class directly, so you don't have to include router. But you have multiple applications, there's multiple routes. Say for a full stack application, you could use the API router class. And so this is how it works. All the verbs work in the same way, as well as delete, puts, everything has everything which is needed. So let's just do a quick recap. We use the FastAPI class instance. The first to use to define a route, we use the FastAPI class instance as a decorator, which takes the verb. It could be put, delete, get, and it takes the path, that's the route parameter. It could it could be just a direct path, or takes an extra variable like we've seen here, which is name. And these includes a curly bracket. Whenever we have something like this, we want to make sure we have a corresponding variable in the route function argument, so we could make use of it in the function body, that is to perform further actions. And just to have query parameters, we could just put, just like we have here, the query parameter. This query parameter is not added to the routes definition. And okay, so that brings us to the end of the screen.
So there is a question which says, why don't you delete the element with DEL or POP?
Of course, we could do that if you wish to, but that obviously, like the smart one, just saves space. But we could as well do this. All works in O of n time, so we could as well just like modify that to say delete. Let's say like attendees, like we have here, attendees.name, which still works. All of this. I like to iterate just because we might have other operations and just to check, attendee. So that works as well. So it depends on whichever works for you.
Okay. So if anybody else has any more questions, please put them in the chat and we can answer them.
Right. Okay, so we'll just go to slides. Yeah. So welcome back. We just give an overview of how APIs are built with FastAPI framework. As you can see, we just have like a number of routes, and it allows us to reload in real time without having to stress. And we have this beautiful interactive page that we saw, which is amazing. But how does FastAPI and Data work? We, as data scientists, you have machine learning models you build. Maybe you want to you build an information retrieval system or even a prediction application that's maybe defined or like checks what cluster a word belongs to. How do you do that? How do you check? How do you know it works? So FastAPI, like I mentioned earlier, is a fast and efficient framework, which has found its use cases to deploy machine learning models on the World Wide Web. Like Netflix uses that. I think it's quite popular. I also use it as well for deploying an application. We're going to see that in a bit. So the FastAPI framework is universal. Previously, people used Flask. You could use FastAPI to do that. It's more faster. So how about we look at a cluster prediction application that to see how it works? Because if you build a prediction application and you have the model, let's say digital notebook, but you need to transfer it so that you and I could check it on the World Wide Web. How do you do that? So let's take a look at this little application I built. We use this cluster engine application here. So we have a number of libraries. We have this looks a bit more advanced. I'm just going to remove this. Okay. Let's make a couple of changes here. So I guess going to return here just to illustrate. Return the results. So we have clusters. So okay. Can we do this as well? Let's move this one. Okay. Trying to return. Function. If that works. Let's see. Like I mentioned earlier, where I said we could define an entry point for application to run using uvicorn. This is an example here where we have to run this particular application. We tell it to reload on the host 0.0.0.0 on the port 8080. So here I have an application that predicts the cluster using the k-means algorithm. You can see here, let's assume everyone here is familiar with the k-means cluster algorithm. It's a non-supervised learning algorithm. And so, on the application startup, we have events in FastAPI. So once the application is first started, so once it started up, we want to train the model with sample images that we've gotten and saved, just to train the clusters and have a couple of clusters. And then we return the list of clusters as well, which is a dictionary that tells us, okay, we have 5 clusters and gives us the words according to a certain cluster. For example, say in cluster 0, we could have NFL, that's the National Football League. So that's what it does once the application is started up first. Then, we have the second route that tells us, okay, when I get here, what do you want to show me? I want to show you the cluster list, which had been trained earlier, the list of clusters. And then we also want to be able to get what cluster a word belongs to using another route. So we have this as well. So I'll go on to terminal to start the application here. Okay, so I'm just going to go here. Okay, you can see the list of clusters, but this looks very strange to look at. And so we're going to use, once again, the interactive documentation that FastAPI provides. I'm just going to show my screen. Okay, switch screen. Okay. Awesome. I think everybody can see my screen. So we have this FastAPI application that returns a list of clusters that have been trained using the k-means algorithm and unsupervised algorithm. So we have an event startup that is once the application is startup, it trains using the sample data and gives us 5 clusters with words which have similar vector counts. Likewise, we have the first route that returns a list of clusters, and then we have a predict route that returns what cluster a word falls into. We have the entry point here, so we don't have to run the command and just start the file the way it is. So in our interactive documentation here, we can get a list of clusters. When we execute this, we can see we have 5 clusters. In 0 cluster, we have official, backfired, attack, and a couple of words. In the second cluster, we have trade 2022. All this data was getting from news feeds, RSS feeds. So we have 5 clusters. How about we try to get, the word like cluster, let's say football, falls into. Simply returning something properly. Okay, so we this is meant to be prediction. I think 0. Let's try this once again. Okay, not sure, so we'll just do a little bit of debugging live and see what prediction it is. Just use this once again. Okay. Okay, so oh, got it. Once again, and see if we have the same error. Let's see, we have some dictionary attributes. Let's see. Let's just want to see what. Okay, so we can see prediction here. Okay, so we are meant to return this, and we have an error kind of converts dictionary. Okay, how about we just make this a prediction? We have an error. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So now we have what cluster this particular word football falls into. So let's check what cluster that is. Second cluster. 0, 1, 2. Okay, so we have this falls under here. So how about we check another word? Let's see prediction. Execute this, we get the first prediction. That's this second place. And see 2022, you can see the first tense and a couple of things. And so this is how FastAPI as well can be used by data scientists. You can train a model before you start your application, return the list of let's say your model results, and then run predictions when you even have routes by. So instead of having to do all of this in your digital notebook and having to send your notebooks link out, so you just host it where you and I can as well access it and then make use of it. And so if you have any questions, that's where we okay. Let's switch screen. Okay. Okay, we are back to slides. Okay, thank you for listening. If you have questions, Reshama, I'd like to have anyone.
So while we give people a few minutes to think of their questions, do you want to speak a little bit about your book?
Sure, please. So my book, Building Python Web APIs with FastAPI, which recently launched 2 weeks ago, it's out. There's a discount. Reshama shared the link in the description. So what we learn from this book is how to build a FastAPI application with little to no knowledge. If you're an expert, it's a good book. If you're a beginner as well, it is aimed at you, intermediate as well. You're going to learn what routing is, how FastAPI works in and out, models. What do we use models for? That we mostly use them for validation and just to structure data. We're also going to learn how to connect to database, how to create efficient, good application that's create, read, update, and delete, just like the verbs you saw earlier. Securing application is also a very big deal in 2022 in modern day web development space. So you're also going to learn how to use that. Lastly, you're going to learn how to deploy application. It has 9 chapters, and each chapter has an in-depth explanation of the topic and with proper examples. And the code can also be found on GitHub. That's the code contained in the book, so you can always refer to them. And so I think if you are interested in learning FastAPI or improving your knowledge of FastAPI, you should grab a copy. And I'll be happy to hear reviews and see what you build if you eventually get one and build a FastAPI application as well. Reshama, I'm going to assume you've added the link to the discount, which is ongoing from now to 25th of August.
I'll share that discount code. Yep, it's this one. Yep. This one has the 30% or the 20% discount. So
Awesome.
yeah. So Abdulazeez, I want to thank you so much for doing this presentation for the community. I found out about your book through a LinkedIn post. So thank you so much for responding to our invitation. We really, really appreciate it. It seems like there aren't any questions, and so we'll be putting this video online within a day. And
awesome.
So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, and the viewers can as well reach out to me on any of these platforms. In the event you have questions or comments or anything about FastAPI and Python, I could reach on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. And I have a number of sample code on GitHub as well.
Great, thank you.
So thank you very much for hosting this event, Reshama.